Welcome to Sheriff's Talk, brought to you by the Missouri Sheriff's Association. During this episode and ones that follow, we'll be talking with sheriffs from across the state regarding topics relating to county law enforcement and jails. So please stay tuned. We'll be right back after a word from our sponsor.
Would you like to find out what's been going on with your county law enforcement? Get a copy of the Missouri Sheriff's and Missouri Jails magazines provided by the Missouri Sheriff's Association. You can find out more at missourisheriffs.com/magazines. Now, here is the host of Sheriff's Talk, Sam Boyd.
Welcome to the show. I want to thank you for watching the last episode if you tuned in. I'm here with Sheriff Bill Puett from Buchanan County. How are you doing, Sheriff?
I'm pretty good. Thanks for having me.
All right. So before we get started, I'd like to give a shout out to our sponsors for sponsoring the show, and we appreciate it. And if you'd like to sponsor the show, please feel free to contact Jeannie Merritt at the Missouri Sheriff's Association. How are you doing?
Doing okay.
Is everything good with you?
Everything's good. Busy. Got a lot of work going, but that's all part of it.
How are your officers and your jail officers all doing?
They're doing good. Short, like a lot of agencies, we're recruiting and looking for good men and women who want to serve our county. But we've got a good staff, and they're doing okay and doing well.
That seems to be the theme all across the state, or probably all across the United States.
I believe
short on law enforcement.
Yes, sir.
Jail. Probably even admin folks, probably short. So you're from Buchanan County.
Yes, sir.
Where is that located in Missouri?
St. Joe, just north of Kansas City.
Okay. What's the population of that area?
We're 125-ish thousand, something like that. We're first-class county, and so we set up there in the northwest corner.
Okay. What size agency? How many officers total?
We're authorized over 100 sworn, and we have over 30 non-sworn in the jail, then administrative staff. We carry about 15 administrative staff. And when you look at it, it's an agency that runs from top to bottom, authorized about 150.
Okay. Do you guys house federal inmates?
We do when needed. We don't on a regular basis.
Okay. And what's your general population on a daily basis for your jail?
We can house approximately 250. And right now we have been low. I probably shouldn't say that, but we've been low, and our average population runs about 160. We're doing good as far as population goes.
I know that's a little bit of a break for your jail staff.
Yes,
being the
is.
jail administrator in the past, I know jail staff like it when the population gets down.
Absolutely. Being short, and we have some that have to work 6 days in a row to cover the shortage. And the advantage is that we don't have as many inmates. We have run 250 before in the jail. And so if we were at 250 and as short as we are, that would be very dangerous and it's concerning that we're short, but I think that it's important that we know that we really have to continue to hold our standards when we're looking at applicants and backgrounds and those type of things. We just can't, in whatever position it is, whether it's in the jail or patrol or investigations or whatever the case is, it's really important to make sure that we still hold those backgrounds. I can't ask somebody to put on this uniform and go out and interact with our citizens if I don't think they're a good person.
You just got done being the board president, the sheriff's board president, correct?
Yes, sir.
How's that feel to get that off your plate?
I was happy to serve the association and do what we could. We've got a lot of great people coming up. We've got a good president. We've got a lot of good people coming in behind him. So I was happy to help. And yeah, it's a relief to be done. It's a very busy year, but we've got some good things going on. Like I said, we've got some good people that want to make sure that the office of sheriff is moved forward. So,
did you just do a year, or were you one of those that gets extended sometimes?
I just did a year, and
okay.
we were all on the regular cycle, so I did a year, and right now I think that's where we're at right now. I don't see that there's going to be any changes. Hopefully, that everybody just has to do a year, and then they're able to get done. Because like I said, it's a huge commitment, and it's good to do it, but you still have to run your office. You still have all the other things that you're responsible for, and then you throw that on your plate. So it's a busy year for you.
Yeah. So if there's anything else you'd like to tell the people listening from your county or your deputies and the jail staff?
I appreciate that. I think that this is a message I try to put out a lot, and the message is this, that I'm the sheriff, but I'm not the sheriff's office. I think it's important for our citizens to know, as well as the staff to know, the sheriff's office is all the hardworking men and women of the office that come to work, and they do their work flawlessly every day, serving our communities. That's really important. You see the sheriff a lot. You see the sheriff out at functions. You see the sheriff on the news and those type of things. But I couldn't do it as well as my brother and sister sheriffs couldn't do it without their staff. The sheriff's office is the hardworking men and women, and I always like to give them kudos for all the hard work that they do for our citizens.
Yeah, they don't get enough praise across the board. Jail staff, my history was a jail administrator, and before that corrections, but you're in that building and the civilians don't see you, and they don't really see what you do on a daily basis or what you deal with. But it's all law enforcement across the board. We thank you, from your sheriff, your chief deputies, me now as a civilian. I appreciate what you do, and it's a hard job, and it's getting tougher as the days go on.
Appreciate that, and like I said, it's really important for our citizens to know, because they don't get to see the staff, and so there's a lot of good, dedicated, hardworking men and women out there.
Yeah. They do show their appreciation. Well, don't say that they don't. Yeah. Christmas time, you get all the lickies and chewies, was what I call them, the donuts and all that stuff that comes in.
There's a lot of support there, absolutely.
Yep.
But I always like the community to know that I don't ever want anybody to think that I do it by myself, and that's one of the big important messages is that there's a lot of folks that make the operations of the sheriff's office.
You couldn't do it.
Oh no, absolutely not. And so there's a lot of people that make the operations of the sheriff's office work, from the chief deputy all the way down to administrative staff and everybody in between.
Yep, absolutely. What we came here to actually discuss today, other than the little introductions we did, is court security. And everything that entails the job of court security, or the process of court security. Sheriff, what is court security? What are we talking about?
Court security is multifaceted, and I think that everybody needs to understand that there's no one answer to this. It's multi-layered, and it's often driven by local rule, both from the court and from the county commission perspective. Court security typically deals with providing a level of security and protection for not only the citizens that are coming in and out and doing business in a courthouse, to protecting the judges, making sure inmates that are there to be adjudicated are secured, keeping staff safe. It's an all-encompassing job to deal with everything in that building.
Do you have to provide security as a sheriff?
That's a good question. As I alluded to a minute ago, it depends on how this works. There's a statute that requires that a sheriff attend the courts, and which then means that we typically hire deputies because no sheriff could be present in every courtroom and handle the business of the courts. So that's where you get court deputies or bailiffs, depending on what term they're called. And there's also a statute in certain circuits. The presiding judge can hire a court marshal, and then that takes that out of the sheriff's hands, and those folks answer directly to the presiding judge. And there's some requirements under that statute, so it could be either way. And to make sure we're clear that the security and the governance of the courthouse falls to two different entities. The first entity is the presiding judge. So the presiding judge has rulemaking authority and control over the courtrooms, and the statute talks about the areas for the business of the court. The presiding judge can deal with that.
So if there's a standalone courthouse with no other offices that belong to the county, the judge would have, I'll say, rule or supervision over that building.
That'd be correct. The presiding judge for the circuit would be the one that would set the rules for that. Now, a lot of courthouses, the other side of this is the county commissioners then have responsibility for the courthouse and the grounds of the courthouse and those type of things. You have two different entities that have governance or control over things going on in the courthouse. So the presiding judge or the county commission. And like you pointed out, if it was a standalone courthouse where it was only courts and not county offices, then it would be the presiding judge only.
Okay. And you said that the judge can assign his own marshal to be in charge of the security for the courthouse?
If they fall under the statute where they can hire a court marshal, there's certain requirements and they could select a court marshal. Typically, in most jurisdictions, you're going to see that the sheriff statute is going to be used, meaning the sheriff is responsible to provide court security, or as the statute uses the word, attend the circuit court or the associate circuit court. That's going to fall to the sheriff to make sure that there is somebody there for the judge and the business of the court.
Okay. So that explains then some of these smaller counties that you go and they have a town square and they've got the courthouse in the middle with all the treasurer and the clerk and all the other offices that the county has. You may walk in a door and there's absolutely no security when you walk through that door, and you can get to the clerk and the collector and the treasurer, and you can get to all those people without having to walk through any kind of metal detector.
Sure.
Or that setup may be the same for another county, and when you do walk in the courthouse to go to those same offices, you may have to walk through depends on the commissioners for that part of it.
Right. Typically what the commissioners will do is they will enter into a contract with the sheriff and ask them to be responsible for the security of the courthouse. If that happens, then the sheriff is the rule maker for how that works. I'll use Buchanan County as an example. We run the security of both the courts and the courthouse. We have a metal detector. We have court deputies at the entrance, as well as other security measures in place. Excuse me. And the county commission was able to turn that over years ago to the sheriff, and it's just handed down. Different counties look at it different ways, and I think it's important to understand. Every once in a while, we'll hear people that will say, "I shouldn't have to be searched or whatever to go in to the people's house and do business." We're in a different day and age. And we have people that continue to bring weapons and items that are hazardous into the courthouse. We have people that we have to provide security for, like I said, and I make a point about the different types of things that go on in the courthouse in a minute, but it's really important. We've seen people try to bring firearms, brass knuckles, knives, all kinds of weapons and different issues into the courthouse, which could obviously create a very dangerous situation. We actually had a hostage situation in a courtroom in Buchanan County some years back, and it was on a divorce proceeding where this was before metal detectors and all those things. And a man who was prepared for the decision not to go his way had smuggled a gun in his boot into the courtroom. And when things didn't go his way, then he took his ex-wife at that point, the judge and members of the court staff hostage, and there was a hostage situation for quite a while till that could get resolved. And you can see why it's really important. Nobody is trying to stop anybody from entering a courthouse to do their business. We just want to make sure that everybody's safe.
Judges and commissioners talk, and like for, let's say, security systems. I'm talking about cameras and stuff like that. Do they share budgets, or how does that work for getting cameras in the courtroom? If the judge is in charge of the courtroom and the commission's in charge of the courthouse, is there an agreement that happens there sometimes to get?
I believe so. Now, again, the judge is responsible for the courtroom, and I don't think that there's a lot of courts that allow cameras, surveillance type cameras in the courtroom. Now, in and around the courtroom and in hallways and things like that, yes, they do. But there are specific statutes and court rules in the state of Missouri that govern the issues of filming and photography and stuff inside the courtroom, and that has to be done specifically according to that statute. So security-wise, there are budget issues, so it goes with what the court budget has, what the county budget has. I would hope that everybody would be very cognizant of the fact that we need to work together and make sure that people are safe and they feel comfortable. I think that there's a lot of people that once they have wrapped their head around it, that they do feel a lot safer doing their business in the courthouse and not having to worry that somebody is smuggled a weapon in or doing those things. And there's a whole laundry list of things that I think that people don't think about, because oftentimes they go there with the concept of, hey, I'm here to pay my taxes, or I'm here to get I lost my tax receipt and I got to go register my car, or I got to go get another copy, or they're there with that. But I think that they don't realize, for example, that there are child custody hearings. Sometimes children are removed from families for abuse and neglect and those type of things. Adult abuse orders are heard and issued, and hearings on that. There's major criminal cases, murders and rapes and all those things where you have things that drive emotions and sometimes violent responses. And civil proceedings of states, there's just a whole bunch of things, property disputes. You just don't know what's going to drive people emotionally. And so that is one of the reasons why there's a huge need for court security and for metal detectors and those type of things, not to be invasive, but to keep everyone safe.
Yeah, there are, like you said, I'll just put it this way, a lot of sensitive things that happen in the courthouse and in the courtroom. If you take that lower to the courthouse, and there may be a citizen that's upset about their taxes, or the treasurer, or their property is getting repossessed because they haven't paid property taxes. And all that happens outside of the courtroom, which we're talking about court security, but it's still going to be part of that court security when you go to looking at cameras in the hallways and metal detectors before you come into a door. In this day and age, as you said, there's a lot of violence that's happening around the country with all kinds of different topics. And a courthouse, with all the things that happen in that house, are very sensitive.
You're absolutely right. There's a lot of violence. There's a lot of people that make very bad decisions. And there's another side of this too, not only safety, but service. And I know that we have a lot of courthouses that are very aged. And so
a lot of jails and sheriff's offices are aged too.
Yeah, absolutely. Lots of steps, lots of ingress and egress problems. We've seen, I know that deputies, we have them fully trained, and we have AEDs and a variety of things in the courthouse. We've seen people fall. We've seen people have heart attacks, reactions to medicine, and those type of things. And we've had deputies that have been able to save and stabilize lives because they were there and they had the training and equipment to do that. And so it's not that they're there just to be hard to live with. They're there to make sure that they are serving our citizens as well.
Yeah. All right. Let's take a break real quick for a commercial for our sponsors. We'll be back in just a minute. Okay, we're back from break here. I want to thank our sponsors again for sponsoring the show. And I'm here with Sheriff Bill Puett from Buchanan County, and we're talking about court security. So we were talking about earlier some of the sensitive stuff that happens at the courthouse. Let's talk about some of the organizations that show up at the courthouse to protest. How do you guys usually handle that situation?
Obviously, there's some statutes that deal specifically with that, and we can get into them here in a second, but everybody has a constitutional right to peacefully protest, which means that it needs to be on the sidewalk, and you can't block ingress or egress to the courthouse. You can't block other people's ability to use the sidewalk. So typically what that means is that you have to be on the sidewalk and you have to keep moving. And they can't be on the courthouse lawn. They can't be inside the courthouse itself and chanting and raising all kinds of problems and those type of things. And sometimes we have people that want to protest, and they will take their signs and they'll make the loop around the courthouse, and that's fine. Sometimes we have people that want to protest a certain concept, or they want something on a ballot, and they'll be out asking people to sign petitions, and they'll be out there on the sidewalk. So the public sidewalk is just that, it's public, and as long as they're out there, they have a constitutional right to do that.
Okay. Do you get involved in that planning when you know that, I'm just going to throw something out there as a scenario. You have that big murder or big child crime that happens where you know that there's going to be a lot of problems with that. Do you get involved in that security planning and all that stuff?
Absolutely. We typically have a fairly large security plan. We do various planning concepts that on how we move the inmate or defendant, whichever term you want to use, how we get them in, how we get them out. We have multiple locations, obviously, depending on what the threat level might be. And as you mentioned, there are some things that are very horrific that drive a emotional response from the community. Typically, the judges work really well with this, and we'll have a security footprint inside the courthouse. And I think most do. When I say we, I'm just using us as an example. I think that this is pretty much a standard. So I'm trying to speak in generalities. I keep saying we, so I apologize for that. But yes, you would do that. I think most judges work very well with the sheriff and that planning to make sure everybody's safe. I've seen judges that will specifically hold, for example, the defendant's family and their side in a courtroom for 15 or 30 minutes after a verdict, let the victim's family get out and get it escorted. So there's various tools to try to de-escalate and make sure that something doesn't go silly or have another heinous act.
You're responsible for the safety of everyone involved. The person that's on trial for whatever it is they did, so the defendants, the plaintiffs, the victim side of it, everyone in the courthouse. It's part of your responsibility for the security of everyone that's involved in the court proceeding or whatever else is happening in the courthouse at that time. Somebody could just be coming in to pay their taxes, like you said, and get caught up in the court protest or whatever it may be.
You're absolutely right. So you have the normal business of the courthouse and any issues or problems there, then you have these other issues. And depending on, do you have protesters outside? Is it just an issue where you have defendant's family and victim's family in a courtroom? Do you have threats made to the judge or to the attorneys? So you have to provide security there and make sure that they get where they need to be and safely. It's a multi-layered concept, especially when you have some of these more horrific trials. Buchanan County has had its share, just like many of the counties, and you get emotionally charged issues that oftentimes create, whether it's an emotional, we've seen responses that become aggressive and violent, and it has to be in a place to deal with that. And whether that means extra officers or stepped up security protocols or other techniques or those type of things, we take this very seriously, and we want to make sure, as all sheriffs do. When I say we, again, I'm trying to speak for all sheriffs. They take this very seriously, and sheriffs work very well together. Sometimes, one thing we haven't mentioned, but change of venue issues. If we have to take all the stuff on the road to some other jurisdiction, or we have to bring a jury from another jurisdiction into our jurisdiction, the sheriffs work really well together because everybody gets it, and they want to make sure that justice is served and everybody's safe.
Because it's sooner or later it's going to happen the other way around, where that sheriff's going to need your help, or you're going to need that sheriff's help, or whichever. Sequestered jury, when you got to sit on the jury all night or for 7 days or whatever it may be.
Sequestered juries are difficult. Absolutely.
So let's talk about the position. So bailiff, is that kind of what the general courthouse officer you got on a normal basis?
Everybody uses different terms. So bailiff is the general term that everybody was used to using. Some use court deputies, and of course, in some instances, they use court marshals. But years ago, before had to have any training requirements, typically what would happen is a judge would get elected or appointed, and then they would say, hey, I want Sam Boyd to be my bailiff. And that was, the judge got to pick their bailiff, their security person, and all that. As you move forward in time, then we see the change in peace officer standards training and requirements for going to the academy and when that has to be done and all those things. That has really changed now. If you are a deputy, you're required to be a certified peace officer in the state of Missouri. A judge can't typically just go pick somebody off the street and say, hey, I want Sam Boyd to be my court bailiff or
Right.
my court deputy if Sam doesn't have a post license or anything like that. Now, knowing that you do, if you want to get back into it, we could probably hook you up. But so that's how they used to. So now it's a little bit more limited. And so the sheriff tries to work with the judge. I know every time we have a new judge that comes in, I always meet with the judge and we go over some things, and I ask them from my staff if they have anybody that they're really interested in. And then we would approach that staff member and see if they're interested to try to make sure that we're working as much with the court as we can. Sometimes the judge may retain that person, or they may want to change because they know somebody or they have a different expectation or whatever the case is. And then court martial, there's a statute specifically for the court martial, and that statute allows the court martial, who then would hire deputy court marshals, to have the same powers as a law enforcement officer, but only when dealing with the business of the court. And they're also required to go to the U.S. Marshal Service court security training and all those things. But so a court martial technically can't go out here and enforce laws like a peace officer could. So a court deputy, a deputy of mine, if they didn't have anything to do, we could put them out on a patrol car and they could go out here and go arrest a burglar. Where the way the court martial statute is, they don't have those peace officer levels of authority outside of the business of the court.
Okay. Yes, there's probably a lot going on in the county. Some of the bigger courthouses, they may have 3 or 4 courts going on at the same time, where some of the smaller counties could possibly have 2 or just 1 going on. That's a court officer or bailiff that has to be in each one of those courtrooms. But a lot of other stuff that's going on is getting inmates from the jail back and forth. If you have a jail that's separate from the courthouse,
Absolutely.
it's that transport back and forth. And
Yeah.
I know in the county I worked for, bailiffs are running back and forth at the same time that there may be a court hearing going on where the bailiff is actually running inmates back and forth
Absolutely right.
at the same time. It's a busy job, but you don't want
absolutely.
you don't want your brand new officer that's just got out of FTO probably handling that job because of that and all the other sensitive stuff that goes on.
Yeah, when you put inmates in the open, that's a security problem.
Yep.
And you hit the nail on the head. We have 6 courts that run at the same time, many days, and we have to take them, the law enforcement centers across the street from the courthouse. And so they're moved in the open. If you have a defendant with a very high security threat concern, it is issues. Those that have buildings that are attached, I think about places like St. Louis and Kansas City. I'm not really sure how many divisions Kansas City has, but at one point I know it was over 30. So you have over 30 courts working down there. There's a huge issue across the board with the level of security and trying to make sure. And as you tied the jail into it, you absolutely are right. When you have inmates that you're moving from the jail to the courthouse, that's a whole other layer of security. And if the court deputy is doing that, then who's watching the court while they're trying to retrieve the inmate, and
Right.
the judge is still conducting business, and so they can be pretty busy. If all the judges are going at the same time, that's pretty much a busy day. We like there's a new, I guess we'll say a new process. We like the electronic stuff. Everybody's starting
The Zooms and the
Zooms,
WebExes, doing that by that way. Yeah, that helps out a lot.
It does. It helps out a lot. And I think that as things go, more of the courts and things are going to use that, especially for initial appearances and certain
Yeah.
type of things like that.
That are You take an inmate over to the courthouse for a 1-minute proceeding that they show up, they stand up, they get a couple things get said, and they're right back out the door.
Yeah.
And why couldn't I have done this by WebEx or Zoom?
Yeah,
that kind of
absolutely.
thing.
And I think it helps the judges, and it keeps a lot of people out of the courtroom. And again, in more modern facilities or even aged facilities where the jail's attached to the courthouse, it makes it a little easier. But those security concerns across the board are huge, especially when you have inmates that are there for very complex and heinous issues.
Right.
It's a concern.
Anytime they're in transport from anywhere, we're talking about court here, but anytime they're being transported anywhere outside, you have less officers and you have more risk. And it's just the most dangerous time probably in this profession is transporting someone in a car or a van or a bus to another location.
It's very dangerous. And the other layer on this, and this will lead into the next podcast, is issues with mental health. They're not mentally incompetent or not able to stand trial until the judge says they are. So we also have to deal with individuals that way and get them through the court process. And that could be several hearings and all that. And I'll just stop there because I don't want to get into I don't want to get into Sheriff Ruth Ann's discussion. So.
That's going to be a real interesting topic. You guys need to tune in for the mental health portion because that's a big problem. But we won't get into it anymore. We'll talk about court security here. So we're still talking about bailiffs, and besides their security duties and make sure everyone's safe and the judge is safe and everybody in the courtroom is safe, the inmate or the plaintiffs, whoever, they probably got some paperwork duties that they're responsible for too.
Lots of paperwork. Law enforcement is not without its paperwork and administrative requirements and the issues of even transporting commitments and orders from the court to the jail or to a civil process division where the judge has ordered certain things, making sure those things are relayed. So, do you hold on to this person? Do you release them? Those type of things.
Yep.
You're also looking at specialty courts, which create other challenges sometimes, depending on if it's a good day or a bad day. For example, drug treatment courts and those type of things. On graduation day, when everybody's happy, that's really good. But when there are issues that are challenging, especially if a person that is in that program has not been following the rules, and we've seen people that break and run, and they have assaulted staff, they have injured citizens as they're trying to flee the courthouse and things like that. You just never really know what that day is going to bring.
There's a lot that goes on with court security and making a courthouse and a courtroom run safely and efficiently with all the movement of people back and forth and stuff like that. We were talking about rules earlier. What are some of the specific rules that get established to maintain order? I know one was that it was hard to enforce, but the judge did that I know of was a dress code. That certain people can't wear certain things when they come into his courtroom or the judge's courtroom.
Correct. A judge is, I hate to use the word king, but a judge is pretty much in charge of the courtroom and can set the rules for what they want. And we have seen judges that have said that certain attire is unacceptable, and they won't let, whether it's a defendant, whether it's a family member, somebody appearing in a civil case, if they're not dressed appropriately, they don't act appropriately, that they will have them removed. Cell phones are a big thing. Even for law enforcement officers, we always warn them that you probably should leave your cell phone in the car, because we've seen judges seize more than one cell phone, and sometimes the first time is 24 hours and the second time is never get it back. There's not a whole lot that you can do to other than plead the mercy of the court at that point. But so that there are a lot of rules. There's rules about hats. There's rules about outbursts and respect. Now, there are specific statutes dealing with things like obstructing government operations, tampering with a judicial proceeding, disrupting a judicial proceeding. There's even one about drunkenness in a courthouse. And then, of course, there is trespassing. If you're told that you're no longer welcome, just like in any place, you have to leave, and they would refuse to leave, then obviously an individual could be arrested for trespassing and taken out of there. If they're in the middle of a proceeding and they're doing something that is adverse to the court proceeding, of course, a judge obviously has the ability to find them and could do those things.
Let's say I know nothing about a courthouse and a courtroom, and I don't know that there's rules. I just never been to court before, and I want to find out this. Is there somewhere in the courthouse that these rules are generally posted?
I've never really seen that. The best advice, and that's a great question, but the best advice I could give is to go and find one of the deputies in the courthouse and just say, hey, I'm coming to court for X on this day, and what do I need to know? What are some of the things that I need to be aware of? I know oftentimes when I go to another jurisdiction to testify, back when I was working a major case squad and we would go and testify, I would always try to get their contact and say, okay, what are the local rules? What does the judge expect? What do they want you to do? Where do they want you to be? And so oftentimes, since there's so many local rules, it's really good. And the deputies are usually good about saying, Judge X, they don't like this or they don't like that, and don't do those things. Obviously, and I alluded to it earlier, but making sure that weapons are not brought into the courthouse, certain things because if weapons are brought into a courthouse, that would trigger the unlawful use of a weapon.
Who can bring a weapon into a courthouse?
Typically, sworn officers have to do that. I know we have a local rule that if you are there for business, then you can bring your firearm. But if you were there as a citizen for a court proceeding, the judges will not allow even an off-duty officer to be armed in the courtroom if they are a party to the action. So if you were there for a child custody dispute, for example, because you're a party to the action, you're not there in an official capacity or you're working as an off-duty person or something like that. Like I said, there's a lot of local rules to how those things go,
And that may be different at another courthouse.
Absolutely, yeah.
So I could be a detective or an officer that's testifying on the stand in uniform, and it's possible that if you're testifying, you shouldn't have a gun on you or something like that, depending on a rule. It just depends on that courthouse.
Yeah, there are rules. I know that we had a couple judges that if it was a jury trial, if you were in a uniform like I am today and had an exposed weapon, that they would make you relinquish your weapon because they felt that it intimidated the jury. Now, if you were testifying in a coat and tie and your weapon was covered, then you were fined. Okay. And that's just a different take on how those rules, local rules and local presiding judges can really make it fit what works for their area, because what works in Buchanan County or Northwest Missouri might not work in Sikeston, or it might not work in Springfield or Hannibal or whatever. And so those presiding judges in that circuit are able to then control and give guidance and rule for what's going to go on in their courtrooms. And then the county commissioners get to make the decisions for the grounds and when the courthouse is open and all that. If they've, again, handed and contracted the sheriff for security, then typically the sheriff will set the rules for the other security stuff.
Sheriff, thanks for coming in today. And then what I'd like to end with is that if you could tell the citizens and anybody that's listening to this reiterate about court security and why it is that certain courthouses or courtrooms are set up the way they are, and be patient. What would you want to say to the citizens and people watching?
Just that it's all there to make sure that everybody's safe and that everybody is able to have the best experience possible, and that justice is served in the courthouse as best as it can be, and that the deputies are just good people doing their jobs and trying to make sure everybody's safe, from that citizen all the way through a defendant in a criminal case, an inmate, a judge, themselves, other citizens, and those type of things. So it really is about providing a service to our citizens and making sure that they're safe and secure against threat, or in the case of any type of injury or illness or anything else. It's an all-encompassing thing, but we just want everybody to be safe.
All right. Thanks for coming in today, Sheriff.
Thank you. I
We appreciate it. It's a good talk. If you're tuning in and listening, we appreciate it. If you would like to subscribe, you can find us on YouTube, comment, subscribe. If you get look on Facebook, look for the link that people are going to send you. We really appreciate your support and would like to hear from you. Thank you very much. And we'd also like to thank the sponsor for sponsoring the show today. All right. Thanks. This is Sam Boyd, the host of Sheriff's Talk. I would like to take this opportunity to thank you for watching our show. If you like this show and want to watch more, and we hope you do, please hit the follow, like, and or subscribe buttons. Feel free to leave a comment. If you'd like to find out more about MSA or become an MSA member, please visit our website, mosheriffs.com, and click Become a Member. Thanks again for watching the show, and we appreciate your support.